All right, in this short video, I want to cover percents one more time. I also want to talk about absolute change and relative change. Let's start with percents. If I want to take a percent, most of the time I personally think in terms of part over a whole. Once I do that, that's going to give me a fraction. If I divide, it's going to give me a decimal. If I multiply it by 100, it's going to give me a percent. For example, Mary brings home, so this is her take-home pay, $3,218 each month. She spends $915 on her rent. What percent of her take-home, of her earnings, does she spend on rent? All right. In this case, the $915 is part of her monthly income. So we would say 915 over 3218 times 100%. If I do 915 divided by 3218, I get 0.28433, lots of digits, times 100%. So if I multiply that by 100, I get this, 28.4. Most of the time, it tells us to go ahead and round it to the nearest tenth. This is the tenth. You look next to it. If this number is less than 5, you are not going to round up. If it's 5 or more, you're going to round up. So the answer to our question is 28.4%. One of the questions somebody asked me earlier was about what do they mean when they talk about a base? The base is the number on the bottom. What are you comparing to? In this case, her take-home pay was the base. You can do it sometimes when you're comparing two fairly different objects, but somehow related. Amy makes $172,000 per year. She owes $230,000 on her mortgage, on her home mortgage. This is not unusual. A lot of people borrow 2 or 3 times what their earnings are when they purchase a house. If you make $50,000 a year, you may borrow $100,000 or $150,000 when it's time to buy a home. What percent of her income is her mortgage? This really isn't a part over the whole question exactly, but they're telling us what the base is. The base is her income. We want to find a percent of her income. So 230,000 divided by 172,000 times 100%. This is going to be more than 100% of her income. She spends more than $172,000, or she owes more. It's not that she's spending it. Notice this is her mortgage. She's probably going to pay that $230,000 out over 15 years, maybe 30 years. So 230,000 divided by 172,000 times 100%. This comes out to be about 130, if I round to the whole number, 134%. Okay. Like I say, I think typically they will let you borrow maybe 200%, maybe double your annual income when you get ready to purchase a home. I'm not sure really. It's been a long time since I bought a house. Okay. In this case, that bottom number would be considered the base. It's what we're comparing to. We're comparing her mortgage. If you think of ratios, we're comparing her mortgage to her income as a percentage of income. All right. Now, a lot of times we're very interested in how things are changing. Particularly things like our income, our investments, our credit card debt, all of those things we may be wanting to know, how is that amount changing? Let's stick with houses. If you buy a house, you purchase a home for $92,000 and you sell it 10 or 20 or 15 years later, sometime, I don't know, for $134,000. Absolute change. Absolute change is just the difference between the ending amount or the ending value minus the beginning value. It's going to be in plain numbers. 134,000 was the ending amount. 92,000 was the beginning amount. If I do 134 minus 92, that's a $42,000 change. And in particular, it's a $42,000 increase because it went up. Relative change says, well, how does that compare to the beginning value? A $42,000 change sometimes is a lot, and sometimes it's not a lot. Relative change is this absolute change. It's the ending amount minus the beginning amount divided by the beginning amount. And then we want to make it a percent times 100%. So in this case, we already calculated this ending amount minus beginning amount. That's the absolute change. It was 42,000 compared to 92,000 times 100%. To the nearest tenth, that comes out to be, if I write it out, it looks like this, 6, 5, 2, 1. So remember, I'm rounding here. 5 or more, that's got to go up. This is going to be 45.7%. That's a pretty high percent increase. Now, let's change the problem a little bit. Let's suppose you buy a house. So you purchase for, will make you much wealthier this time, $300,000. And then you turn around and sell it for $342,000. Your absolute change is the exact same as the earlier example. 342,000 minus 300,000 is 42,000. But this isn't as big a relative change. You do 42,000 compared to a beginning price of 300,000. That's an increase of 14%. Came out exactly. This person, who probably is in a lower income bracket, who bought a house for $92,000 and sold for $134,000, is probably a lot happier with that $42,000 change than somebody who bought for $300,000 and sold for $342,000. Of course, it also would depend on how many years you had to own the home. If this person at the bottom only owned the home for 1 or 2 years, he's probably thrilled. But if he owned this house for 20 years, and this other guy owned his house for 20 years, then this guy had a much better relative change. I hope that just helps that absolute change and relative change feel a little more solid, and that you're getting more and more comfortable with calculating percents.